Stay with me, because by the end of this night, one billionaire father would erase a CEO's empire with the same precision that man once used to build it. The first scream never came from Evelyn Carter. It came from the crowd. A sharp collective gasp cut through the warm California night just as the golf club slipped from Damien Vaughn's hand and skidded across the marble terrace beside the illuminated pool. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. A violinist stopped playing mid-note. Somewhere in the distance, waves crashed against the cliffs below the mansion like distant thunder. Evelyn's body hit the edge of the reflecting pool with a sickening splash that silenced 200 of the most powerful people in Newport Beach. Her white maternity dress bloomed red at the shoulder where she had fallen against the stone edge, and for one terrible second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Damien Vaughn stood motionless beneath the gold lights of the charity gala, chest rising hard beneath his tailored tuxedo, his expensive Rolex catching flashes from dozens of stunned cell phones now pointed directly at him. The famous CEO of Vaughn Holdings. America's golden businessman. The man Forbes once called the perfect modern husband. And at his feet, 8 months pregnant with his child, was his wife. Sabrina Blake recovered first. She stepped forward in silver heels, one manicured hand touching Damien's arm gently like she was calming a frightened animal instead of a man who had just shattered his own public image. "Damien," she whispered softly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. She slipped. Evelyn tried to push herself up from the cold water, but pain shot through her sides so sharply that her breath caught in her throat. Her baby moved suddenly inside her stomach, frantic enough to make terror flood her chest. She wrapped both arms around her belly instinctively, trembling as water dripped from her blonde hair onto the marble beneath her knees. Across the terrace, nobody rushed to help her. Investors stared in horror. Socialites exchanged frozen glances. One woman quietly lowered her champagne flute onto a table before turning her child away from the scene. Damien finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You embarrass me." The words landed heavier than the silence around them. Evelyn looked up at him through blurred vision, unable to recognize the man standing above her. 5 years earlier, Damien Vaughn had kissed her beneath cathedral lights and promised to protect her forever. Tonight, under chandeliers and camera flashes, he looked at her like she was the problem ruining his perfect life. Then came the sound nobody noticed at first. A soft mechanical click above the clubhouse entrance. Tiny. Harmless. Easy to ignore. But security cameras never blinked without reason. High above the terrace, a small red light reflected against polished glass as the entire nightmare continued recording frame by frame. Sabrina glanced upward for half a second, and something cold passed across her face before disappearing behind another practiced smile. Sirens began echoing faintly somewhere beyond the gates of the estate. Guests slowly stepped backward, creating distance between themselves and scandal the way wealthy people always did. Damien loosened his cufflinks with shaking fingers while Evelyn remained on the marble beside the pool, soaked, shaking, and struggling to breathe normally. Then, from deep inside the mansion, an older man's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Call William Carter." And just like that, several guests went pale. The ambulance lights painted the mansion walls red and blue while guests disappeared into black luxury cars like ghosts fleeing a crime scene. Newport Beach police officers moved quietly across the terrace, speaking into radios beneath the soft jazz music that still drifted awkwardly through hidden speakers because nobody had remembered to turn it off. Evelyn lay on the stretcher wrapped in warm blankets, her breathing uneven as paramedics checked the baby's heartbeat for the third time. The rapid pulsing sound filled the cold night air. Strong. Fast. Alive. One paramedic nodded carefully. "Your son is still moving normally, ma'am, but we need to get you to St. Mary's now." Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, trying not to cry. The baby kicked again beneath her trembling hands, and relief mixed painfully with fear. Nearby, Damien stood beside 2 attorneys already flown in from downtown Los Angeles. His tuxedo jacket was gone now, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight as he spoke in clipped whispers that sounded more like boardroom negotiations than concern for his pregnant wife. "No media statements tonight," he ordered. Nobody talks until my legal team approves it. Sabrina remained close beside him, wrapped in a cream cashmere shawl someone had brought from inside the mansion. Her mascara was perfect. Her expression carefully wounded. She leaned into Damien's shoulder just enough for photographers outside the gates to capture the image if they managed to get through security. Victim. Supportive partner. Future replacement. Evelyn watched them through blurred eyes and finally understood something terrifying. They were not shocked by what happened tonight. They were shocked it happened publicly. A cold wind rolled in from the Pacific, carrying the scent of salt water and expensive cigar smoke across the terrace. Somewhere behind the crowd, a man quietly muttered, "William Carter is going to destroy him." The sentence spread through the remaining guests like electricity. Damien heard it too. For the first time all night, uncertainty flickered across his face. Because everyone in California finance knew the same story. 15 years ago, Damien Vaughn had been nobody. A scholarship kid with one suit and a collapsing startup. William Carter had invested $5 million before anyone else believed in him. Opened doors. Introduced investors. Built Vaughn Holdings beside him piece by piece. Then Evelyn Carter met Damien at a charity dinner in San Francisco, and against her father's warnings, she fell in love with the ambitious young businessman who looked at her like she mattered more than money. William had never approved of the marriage completely, but he attended the wedding anyway. Smiled for cameras. Paid for the cathedral flowers. 3 years later, after a brutal argument about Damien's growing obsession with image and control, Evelyn stopped speaking regularly to her father altogether. Damien made sure of that. Isolation came slowly in wealthy marriages. Fewer visits. Fewer calls. More explanations. More silence. Now, lying beneath flashing ambulance lights with bruised ribs and soaked hair clinging to her face, Evelyn realized how completely alone she had become. Or at least she had been until tonight. A police officer approached Damien carefully. "Sir, we are going to need security footage from the property." Damien's expression hardened instantly. "My team handles all internal recordings." But before the officer could answer, another voice interrupted from behind the crowd. Calm. Older. Controlled. "Actually," the man said quietly, "those recordings now belong to me." The entire terrace turned toward the entrance of the mansion as a black Rolls-Royce stopped beneath the front staircase. The driver stepped aside. And William Carter finally arrived. William Carter stepped out of the Rolls-Royce with the quiet authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice to ruin lives. At 70 years old, the founder of Carter Global still carried himself like the most dangerous person in any room. His silver hair reflected the mansion lights as ocean wind moved through the terrace, and one by one, people lowered their eyes when he walked past them. Not because they respected him. Because they feared what happened to people who disappointed him. Damien straightened immediately. "William," he said carefully, forcing calm into his voice, "this is not what it looks like." William did not answer. He kept walking across the marble terrace until he reached Evelyn's stretcher. For a second, the billionaire looked down at his daughter without speaking. Her soaked dress. Her trembling hands protecting her stomach. The bruise darkening near her shoulder beneath the emergency blanket. The daughter who used to fall asleep on his chest during long flights between New York and London. The little girl who once wore plastic tiaras around the Carter estate pretending she owned the world. Evelyn tried to sit up slightly. "Dad?" Her voice cracked the moment she said it. William's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Then he placed one steady hand against her wet hair, brushing it gently away from her face. "Do not move, sweetheart," he said softly. The tenderness in his voice startled everyone nearby more than his anger would have. Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. She had not heard him call her sweetheart in nearly 4 years. Behind them, Damien stepped closer, adjusting his cufflinks nervously. "The situation escalated emotionally," he began. "There are misunderstandings Sabrina can explain." William slowly turned toward him. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. "You hit my pregnant daughter in front of 200 witnesses," William said calmly. Do not insult me by calling that a misunderstanding. Sabrina crossed her arms against the cold. Evelyn became unstable tonight, she interrupted carefully. She was emotional and… William looked at her once. Just once. Sabrina stopped speaking immediately. Nearby, one of the paramedics quietly whispered to another. That woman has no idea who she is talking to. Damien swallowed hard. William, let us handle this privately. The older billionaire gave the faintest smile. It contained absolutely no warmth. Privately? He repeated. Son, your guests already uploaded the videos. Damien's face drained of color. At the edge of the property gates, flashing camera lights suddenly exploded through the darkness. Reporters had arrived faster than anyone expected. Somebody inside. The gala leaked the story already. Phones began vibrating across the terrace almost simultaneously. Investors. Journalists. Board members. One trembling executive near the bar quietly stared at his screen before whispering, "Oh my God!" A trending headline from a major news account had just appeared online. CEO's scandal at Newport charity gala. Witnesses describe pregnant wife injured during public incident. Millions of followers were already sharing clips filmed from different angles around the terrace. William noticed Damien checking his own phone and finally took one slow step closer. Do you remember what I told you the day you married her? He asked quietly. Damien said nothing. But he remembered. 5 years ago, inside a private study lined with whiskey and leather books, William Carter had looked the young CEO directly in the eyes and said one sentence. If you ever make my daughter cry, I will not sue you. I will erase you. The ambulance doors opened behind them with a metallic thud. Evelyn winced as paramedics prepared to move her inside. William immediately turned back toward his daughter, his entire expression softening again. I am here now, he told her gently. Nobody is going to hurt you again. And for the first time that night, Damien Vaughn looked afraid. St. Mary's Medical Center smelled like antiseptic, coffee, and rain-soaked wool coats brought in from the storm gathering outside. Nurses moved quickly beneath fluorescent lights while security guards quietly blocked reporters from entering the maternity floor. By midnight, every major business network in America had picked up the story. Footage from the gala spread across social media faster than Vaughn Holdings could suppress it. Millions watched grainy clips of Evelyn collapsing near the reflecting pool while commentators argued online about what really happened. Some defended Damien. Most did not. Inside a private hospital suite on the 14th floor, Evelyn sat propped against white pillows while fetal monitors traced steady lines across glowing screens beside her bed. The soft heartbeat of her unborn son filled the room every few seconds like proof she still had something left worth fighting for. William stood near the window overlooking downtown Newport Beach, one hand resting in his pocket while the city lights reflected across the glass. He had barely spoken during the drive from the mansion. That frightened Evelyn more than anger would have. Her father had always been loud when emotional. Silence meant calculation. Finally, he turned toward her. Why did you hide this from me? Evelyn stared down at the hospital blanket gathered around her stomach. She already knew what he meant. Not tonight. The years before tonight. The distance. The lies she covered for. The dinners she skipped. The excuses she invented whenever Damien lost his temper behind closed doors and apologized afterward with diamonds and promises. I thought I could fix him, she whispered. William closed his eyes briefly like the sentence physically hurt him. Sweetheart, broken people do not become whole by breaking the people who love them. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision immediately. Outside the room, 2 Carter Global security officers quietly escorted a nervous hospital administrator down the hallway while attorneys carrying black leather folders moved in and out of elevators non-stop. William Carter had not slept. He had mobilized. His phone buzzed again against the windowsill. He glanced down once before answering calmly. Yes. A pause. Pull every Carter investment tied to Vaughn Holdings by opening bell. Another pause. No exceptions. Evelyn looked up sharply. Dad? William ended the call slowly. He built his empire with borrowed trust, he said. Tonight I am collecting the debt. Before Evelyn could answer, another sound interrupted the room. The television mounted near the ceiling suddenly switched on by itself. Breaking news flooded the screen. Damien Vaughn appeared outside the hospital surrounded by cameras and lawyers, rain striking the shoulders of his dark overcoat, while reporters shouted questions over each other. Mr. Vaughn, did you assault your wife tonight? Is it true security footage was seized? Are investors leaving Vaughn Holdings? Damien forced a controlled expression despite flashes exploding around his face. My wife suffered an unfortunate accident during a stressful evening, he said carefully. False narratives online are being weaponized against my family. Family? Evelyn almost laughed at the word. Then the reporter nearest to Damien asked the question that changed everything. Sir, if this was an accident, why are there now reports of a second camera angle? Damien froze for less than 2 seconds. But 2 seconds was enough. William noticed it immediately. So did millions of viewers watching live across the country. The CEO recovered quickly. No further comment, he snapped before security pushed through the crowd. But the damage was done. In the hospital room, William slowly lowered the remote control onto the table beside him. Interesting, he murmured quietly. Evelyn looked at him. What? Her father's eyes hardened like steel beneath the cold hospital lights. The second camera, he said. I never mentioned it. Silence filled the room. Then William Carter smiled for the first time that night. And somehow, that smile looked more dangerous than rage ever could. By 6 o'clock the next morning, the storm over Newport Beach had passed, but the financial storm surrounding Damien Vaughn was only beginning. Trading screens inside Manhattan investment firms glowed red before sunrise as Vaughn Holdings stock dropped nearly 18% in pre-market trading. News anchors spoke in tense voices over dramatic footage from the gala while legal analysts debated whether criminal charges could follow. But inside the executive floors of Carter Global in downtown Los Angeles, nobody raised their voice. Nobody panicked. Revenge at that level did not sound emotional. It sounded organized. William Carter sat alone in a glass conference room overlooking the city while rainwater slid slowly down the windows behind him. In front of him rested 3 phones, 2 legal folders, and a silver watch Evelyn had given him for his 65th birthday. One by one, powerful people entered the room. Attorneys, bank executives, former senators. Men who once toasted Damien Vaughn at charity galas now avoided even saying his name aloud. Freeze all pending acquisitions connected to Vaughn Holdings, William said calmly without looking up from the documents in front of him. Pull Carter Global advertising partnerships immediately. A woman near the end of the table hesitated carefully. Sir, that alone could cost Vaughn over $90 million by Monday. William finally looked up. Good. The room fell silent again. Meanwhile, 40 miles away inside his oceanfront penthouse, Damien stared at 6 muted televisions showing his own face from different angles. Every network carried the same headline. CEO under fire after gala incident. His legal team crowded around marble countertops littered with untouched espresso cups and emergency press statements. Sabrina paced near the balcony in silk pajamas beneath an oversized cashmere robe, scrolling furiously through social media comments. They are calling me a homewrecker, she snapped. Do something. Damien ignored her completely. His attention remained fixed on the television, replaying the moment he froze after hearing the reporter mention the second camera angle. Again and again. Millions had already clipped the reaction online. One legal advisor loosened his tie nervously. The board is requesting an emergency meeting. Another added quietly. 3 investors pulled out overnight. Damien rubbed both hands across his face. For the first time in years, he looked tired instead of powerful. Find the footage, he ordered coldly. Every copy. Sabrina stopped pacing. What if William already has it? The room went still. Damien slowly lowered his hands. Somewhere deep beneath his anger, real fear finally began settling in. Because he knew William Carter better than most people did. The billionaire never acted publicly unless he already controlled the ending. Back at St. Mary's Hospital, Evelyn woke slowly to pale morning light spilling across her private suite. The baby monitor beside her bed pulsed with steady rhythm while distant helicopter sounds drifted through the city skyline outside. For a brief moment, everything felt strangely peaceful. Then she noticed the empty chair near the window. Her father was gone. A nurse entered quietly carrying fresh flowers. White orchids. Expensive. Elegant. Your father stepped out about an hour ago. The nurse explained gently. But he asked me to give you this. She handed Evelyn a folded envelope sealed with the Carter Global crest. Inside was a single printed photograph. Evelyn's breath caught instantly. The image came from high above the gala terrace. A clear security angle showing Sabrina whispering something sharply into Damien's ear moments before everything spiraled out of control. At the bottom of the photograph, someone had handwritten one sentence in black ink. Watch her hands. Evelyn looked closer. And suddenly her stomach dropped. Because in Sabrina's left hand, partially hidden beneath the champagne table, was Damien's golf club already pressed into his palm before the argument even started. It had not been random. It had been prepared. The emergency board meeting at Vaughn Holdings began at exactly 9:30 Monday morning beneath cold white lights and a 20-foot glass logo that suddenly looked fragile instead of powerful. Damien Vaughn walked into the executive conference room wearing a charcoal suit and controlled expression, but everyone noticed the difference immediately. No one stood to greet him anymore. No one smiled. The same executives who once laughed too loudly at his jokes now avoided eye contact entirely. Outside the building, protesters lined the sidewalks holding signs demanding accountability, while news helicopters circled overhead like vultures waiting for collapse. Inside the boardroom, giant television screens displayed financial losses in brutal real time. Down 26%. Multiple investors withdrawing. Partnership suspension spreading hour by hour. Damien dropped a folder onto the polished walnut table. This company survives if we stay united, he said sharply. One manipulated story does not erase 15 years of success. Nobody answered. Then the conference room doors opened quietly behind him. William Carter entered without hurry, wearing a navy overcoat and silver tie, accompanied by 2 attorneys and the kind of silence only truly powerful people carried with them. Several board members visibly straightened in their chairs the moment he appeared. Damien's jaw tightened. This is a private meeting. William removed his gloves calmly. Not anymore. One attorney slid legal documents across the table. Another connected a flash drive into the presentation system. Damien took one step forward. What exactly are you trying to do? William finally looked directly at him. Finish what you started. The room fell completely silent except for the soft hum of the projector warming overhead. Then the screen behind them lit up. Security footage. Crystal clear. Not the shaky phone clips already flooding social media. This angle came from inside the clubhouse overlooking the terrace from above. Every executive in the room stared as the footage began replaying the moments before the gala incident. Damien standing near the pool. Evelyn arriving quietly beside him. Sabrina approaching seconds later in silver heels holding 2 champagne glasses. Then came the detail nobody expected. Sabrina slipped Damien's golf club into his hand beneath the table, while speaking close against his shoulder. Deliberate. Planned? One board member muttered. Jesus Christ. The footage continued. Sabrina pointing toward Evelyn. Damien's expression changing. Guests turning. Chaos unfolding. William paused the video before the final impact near the pool edge. He did not need to show the rest. The room already understood. Damien stared at the frozen screen in disbelief. That proves nothing, he snapped. You are manipulating context. But his voice lacked conviction now. Because deep down, he knew the truth looked worse than any headline. One older director slowly removed his glasses. Did you lie to this board? Damien looked around desperately. I was protecting the company. Another director answered coldly. You were protecting yourself. Across the city, financial news networks interrupted regular programming as anonymous leaks from inside the boardroom began spreading online almost instantly. William Carter had not merely attacked Damien publicly. He had isolated him strategically. Bankers, directors, sponsors, politicians. Every escape route disappearing one by one. Damien turned towards Sabrina sitting near the end of the table. Say something. But Sabrina looked pale now, fingers trembling around her untouched water glass. She finally understood the difference between dating a wealthy man and standing against a billionaire dynasty. William stepped closer to the head of the table. My daughter spent years protecting your image, he said quietly to Damien. You should have spent those years protecting her. Then he placed one final document in front of the board chairman. Emergency motion for removal of Damien Vaughn as Chief Executive Officer of Vaughn Holdings. The chairman looked down at the paper for several long seconds before slowly reaching for a pen. And for the first time in his adult life, Damien Vaughn realized money could not save him from consequences. The vote lasted less than 4 minutes. That was all it took to dismantle the empire Damien Vaughn had spent 15 years building. One by one, board members raised their hands beneath the cold executive lighting while cameras from financial networks waited outside the building for rumors already spreading through Wall Street. Remove the chief executive officer immediately. Suspend all voting privileges pending investigation. Launch internal review. Every motion passed almost unanimously. Damien remained seated at the head of the table long after the final vote ended, staring at the polished wood surface in front of him as if refusing to accept reality could somehow reverse it. Across from him, William Carter adjusted the cuff of his shirt calmly, the movement almost gentle. You should leave before the markets close, he said quietly. It is less humiliating that way. Damien's face darkened instantly. This is not over. William gave the faintest nod. No, he agreed. It is not. Security entered moments later. Not police. Corporate security. Men Damien himself hired years ago to protect the building. Now they stood waiting beside the conference room doors for him. The symbolism was almost cruel. Sabrina rose quickly from her chair. This is insane, she snapped, her voice finally cracking under pressure. You cannot destroy someone over one mistake. William looked at her with complete indifference. The mistake was believing actions do not become consequences simply because rich people commit them. One of the directors slid a tablet across the table toward Sabrina. Miss Blake, he said stiffly. Human Resources has terminated your consulting contract effective immediately. Sabrina blinked down at the screen in disbelief. You are firing me? Another director answered coldly. The internet already fired you 6 hours ago. By noon, clips from the second camera angle flooded every major platform in America. News commentators replayed the footage frame by frame while body language experts analyzed Sabrina's movements beside Damien at the gala. Millions watched the subtle moment she placed the golf club into his hand before the confrontation escalated. Overnight, she transformed from glamorous socialite into the most hated woman online. Sponsors vanished. Fashion brands removed her photos. Her social media following collapsed so quickly that even entertainment channels began calling it digital exile. But the real damage came at 1:23 in the afternoon. That was when an anonymous source leaked private messages between Sabrina and one of Damien's former assistants. Messages discussing Evelyn's pregnancy. Messages mocking her isolation from her father. Messages suggesting the gala would be the perfect public breaking point. Nothing explicitly criminal, but emotionally devastating. America stopped seeing a scandal. They started seeing cruelty. At St. Mary's Hospital, Evelyn watched the chaos unfold silently from her bed while soft rain tapped against the windows beside her. Nurses whispered outside her room whenever they thought she could not hear. One called her brave. Another called William Carter terrifying. The baby shifted gently beneath her hand as another news alert flashed across the television. Vaughn Holdings shares down 41%. Experts predict collapse of leadership structure. Evelyn muted the screen immediately. She no longer felt satisfaction watching Damien fall. Only exhaustion. Her father entered quietly carrying takeout coffee in a folded wool coat draped over one arm. "You should rest," he said gently. Evelyn looked toward him carefully. "Did you leak the messages?" William handed her the coffee first before answering. "No." She frowned slightly. "Then who did?" For the first time since the gala, William seemed genuinely thoughtful. "That," he said slowly, "is what worries me." Before Evelyn could respond, another notification appeared across the television screen in bright red letters. Breaking news. Former Vaughn Holdings employee announces live interview tonight. Claims there is more unreleased footage from gala incident. William stared at the headline for several silent seconds. Then his expression hardened again. Because someone else had entered the war now. And they were not asking permission. At 8 o'clock that night, nearly 23 million people tuned in to watch the live interview. Restaurants lowered television volume to hear it better. Airport travelers stopped beside glowing news screens. Even traders on Wall Street paused mid-conversation as the broadcast countdown began. The nation wanted answers. But inside a dark hospital room overlooking Newport Beach, Evelyn Carter watched the screen with growing unease while rain rolled softly against the glass outside. William stood near the doorway speaking quietly into his phone with two attorneys beside him. "Find out who approved this interview," he ordered. Immediately. On television, the host adjusted her papers beneath bright studio lights before introducing the anonymous former Vaughn Holdings employee who claimed to possess unreleased evidence from the gala. Then the guest walked onto the stage. And Evelyn stopped breathing for a second. "Marcus Reed," she whispered. William turned sharply toward the screen. Marcus Reed had once been Damien Vaughn's closest friend and chief financial officer. The man who helped build Vaughn Holdings from a tiny startup into a billion-dollar empire. 3 years earlier, Marcus disappeared suddenly from public business life after what Damien called a private disagreement over company direction. But rumors had always suggested something darker. Financial manipulation. Hidden accounts. Threats behind closed doors. Tonight Marcus looked older. Tired. His navy suit hung loose around his shoulders, and deep lines marked his face beneath studio lighting. But his eyes remained steady. "Mr. Reed," the host began carefully. "Why come forward now?" Marcus stared directly into the camera for several seconds before answering. "Because a pregnant woman almost lost her child while powerful people tried to protect a public image." Silence filled the studio. Inside the hospital room, Williams slowly lowered his phone. Marcus continued. "America thinks the gala incident was the beginning of this story. It was not. It was simply the first time the cameras were pointed in the right direction." Evelyn felt cold suddenly despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The host leaned forward carefully. "Are you saying there were previous incidents?" Marcus nodded once. "I am saying Vaughn Holdings spent years burying complaints, silencing employees, and protecting Damien Vaughn because success made people morally flexible." The screen behind him lit up with internal company emails and settlement records. Human resources complaints. Confidential payouts. Security reports. Not criminal proof. But enough to destroy what remained of Damien's reputation forever. Across social media, reactions exploded instantly. Former employees began posting their own experiences online. Anonymous accounts shared stories about Damien's temper, Sabrina's manipulation inside the company, and executives pressured into silence. The perfect CEO image shattered completely in less than an hour. Then Marcus reached inside his jacket and removed a small black flash drive. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. William's expression darkened immediately. Even he had not expected this. 3 days before the gala, Marcus continued, Damien Vaughn ordered private security modifications at the estate. Additional camera angles. Expanded terrace coverage. Specifically around the pool area. Evelyn's stomach tightened painfully. "No." Marcus looked directly into the camera again. That night was not entirely spontaneous. The studio fell silent. The host herself seemed shaken now. Are you suggesting premeditation? Marcus answered carefully. I am suggesting somebody expected a public confrontation and prepared to control the narrative afterward. In Damien Vaughn's empty penthouse overlooking the Pacific, another television replayed the interview to a room filled with shattered silence. Damien stood near the balcony gripping a whiskey glass so tightly his knuckles turned white while Sabrina stared at the screen in horror. He is lying, she whispered weakly. But Damien no longer looked angry. He looked hunted. Back inside St. Mary's Hospital, William turned the television off completely. The room instantly became quiet except for the soft heartbeat monitor beside Evelyn's bed. Steady. Rhythmic. Alive. William walked slowly toward his daughter and placed one hand gently against her shoulder. Listen to me carefully, he said in a low voice. From this moment forward, nobody enters this floor without my approval. Evelyn looked up at him fearfully. Dad, what are you not telling me? William stared toward the rain-dark window for several long seconds before answering. I think Damien Vaughn just realized prison is a possibility. 3 weeks later, the rain finally stopped over Newport Beach. Morning sunlight spilled across the upper floors of St. Mary's Medical Center, turning the windows gold while nurses moved quietly through the maternity wing carrying flowers, paperwork, and cups of burnt hospital coffee. The chaos outside had not disappeared. News vans still waited near the entrance. Reporters still tracked every development surrounding Damien Vaughn's collapse. But inside room 1416, for the first time in a very long time, Evelyn Carter felt something stronger than fear. Peace. The soft cry of a newborn filled the room just before dawn. Tiny. Angry. Alive. Evelyn held her son carefully against her chest while tears slid silently down her face. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Healthy lungs. Strong heartbeat. The doctor called him a miracle considering the stress his mother endured during the final weeks of pregnancy. William stood beside the hospital window holding a paper cup of untouched coffee, watching sunlight slowly rise over the Pacific Ocean. He had not left the hospital once during Evelyn's labor. Billion-dollar meetings were postponed. International calls ignored. For the first time in decades, William Carter allowed the world to wait for him instead. The baby wrapped his tiny hand around Evelyn's finger, and something inside her finally broke loose. Not pain. Relief. He has your eyes, William said quietly from across the room. Evelyn smiled weakly. No, she whispered. He has yours. William looked away immediately after that, clearing his throat once as emotion briefly crossed his face. Men like him survived entire industries by never appearing fragile. But hospitals and newborn children had a way of dismantling even the strongest armor. A soft knock interrupted the moment. One of William's attorneys stepped carefully inside carrying a black folder beneath his arm. Sir, he said quietly, the hearing concluded 30 minutes ago. Evelyn's smile faded slightly. William accepted the folder without opening it immediately. He already knew the result. Damien Vaughn had officially resigned from every executive position connected to Vaughn Holdings late the previous night. Federal investigators launched formal financial inquiries after Marcus Reed's testimony triggered multiple whistleblower reports from former employees. Sponsors disappeared. Property sold. Even the Newport mansion overlooking the cliffs had gone dark, listed quietly through a private brokerage no luxury buyer wanted associated with scandal. Sabrina Blake vanished from public life completely after her final attempted interview collapsed under backlash and leaked messages. The internet moved on eventually the way it always did. But Damien Vaughn's name remained attached to one phrase forever. The gala incident. William finally opened the folder slowly before handing one document to Evelyn. Divorce finalized. Full custody agreement approved. Financial protections established for mother and child through Carter Family Trust. Evelyn stared down at the papers for several silent seconds before placing them aside untouched. None of it mattered as much as the warm weight sleeping peacefully against her chest now. What happens next? She asked softly. William looked at his grandson first before answering. Next? He smiled faintly. Next, you stop surviving and start living again. Outside the hospital, cameras waited for statements that never came. No dramatic press conference. No victory speech. No public revenge celebration.